Promise, no pop quizzes on syntax today.
None. We are here to talk about the things that are dominating culture, driving discourse, and frankly, setting the book charts on fire.
Just high-level targeted analysis. It's a pleasure to be diving into this one. It's a particularly thorny cultural trend.
I'm your host, and with me as always is our expert, who can take this just sprawling landscape of cultural trends and distill it down into genuine, actionable insight. And today, we are strapping in for a fascinating, and I have to say, perhaps a slightly alarming journey into the current state of modern romance fiction.
It is a wild ride.
We're deep diving into a whole stack of sources, all detailing this massive cultural shift in the charts. I'm talking about the rise and the intense scrutiny of the so-called psychopath-light hero.
And this is so much more than just, a literary trend. This is a deep dive that really speaks volumes, not just about what millions of people are reading, but more importantly, about what social needs they are craving culturally, what's missing.
Right.
You are peeling back the layers of a really polarizing shift, one that has decisively moved the conversation beyond the traditionally misunderstood, brooding bad boy.
Yeah, that's old news.
Way beyond him. We're straight into the far more ethically complicated territory of the dangerous man. It's a whole new frontier in fictional desire.
And our mission for you, the listener, is sharp and it's clear. By the end of this deep dive, you will have a structured, comprehensive understanding of this really complex cultural moment. We need to analyze three interconnected areas. First, we're going to define exactly what this specific psychopath-light trope even entails. I mean, what specific clinical traits are being leveraged, which ones are, conveniently left out, and why this hybrid monster is just so popular right now.
And second, we have to dissect that razor-thin, highly debated line between enjoying dark fiction as a legitimate fantasy.
The imaginative laboratory, as they call it.
Exactly. The imaginative laboratory and the genuine acknowledged risk of subconsciously normalizing harmful, coercive behaviors in real life. That's the core tension.
And finally, we're going to explore how this colossal, hugely influential force of the BookTok reading community is actively enforcing a new era of accountability and transparency on authors, on content warnings, on responsible marketing, all of it.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
It really is. So this deep dive is your shortcut to truly understanding this highly dynamic and often ethically scrutinized corner of our current culture.
So let's get right into the heart of the matter. Let's define the monster.
Okay, let's unpack this shift in the literary landscape. Our sources all seem to confirm something really fundamental, which is that the knight in shining armor narrative...
He's gone.
He's gone. That purely moral, traditionally good hero. He is effectively obsolete in the best-selling romance charts of 2026.
Completely. Readers are demanding something infinitely more complicated, something with serious edges.
And often, something that is objectively wrong. I mean, wrong to anyone outside the central relationship.
The shift is comprehensive. And the hero archetype that readers are gravitating toward now is this psychopath-light hero. To fully grasp his appeal, you first have to understand his function in the narrative. He is, by all external objective measures, a villain.
Right, not an anti-hero, a villain.
A straight-up villain. He's ruthless, he's morally bankrupt, he operates far outside the boundaries of polite legal society. He is feared by the entire world of the story.
So he's a fully operational menace. He might be a crime boss, a spy, an untouchable corporate killer, a cult leader.
All of the above.
But when it comes to her, the protagonist, all of that villainy is entirely channeled. It's focused, and ultimately it's dedicated to her and her alone.
That channeling is the crucial distinction. This is why that lead designation is so important, and it's a point we really need to dwell on. The source material indicates the archetype specifically cherry-picks traits from the clinical definition of psychopathy. So you get things like profound emotional detachment from the general population.
Right.
A high propensity for risk-taking, a stunning lack of social empathy, and this exceptional, almost predatory focus.
But wait, if he were a full clinical psychopath, wouldn't he be totally incapable of romance or even just long-term attachment? Wouldn't he just be purely chaotic and destructive to everyone, including her?
Precisely. And that's the light boundary. That's where the fantasy kicks in. A true, full-spectrum clinical psychopath, the kind you'd read about in a textbook, often lacks the capacity for genuine, focused attachment or long-term planning outside of pure self-interest, or, the stability required to maintain any kind of dedicated relationship. The psychopath-like hero has to omit those destructive traits.
So the author is performing a kind of narrative surgery. They selectively remove the traits that would make the relationship impossible.
Well, the chaos, yeah.
Right, the chaos, the purely self-serving short-sightedness, the inability to feel any loyalty at all. And instead, they graft the remaining traits, the dangerous ones, onto a single emotional core, the heroine.
Exactly. He retains the ruthless efficiency, the predatory competence, and the world-dominating power. But all of it is then repurposed. It's all for her.
So he's unhinged to literally everyone else in the story.
To everyone.
Sure.
He will destroy rivals, disregard human life, commit high felonies without even blinking. But he is simultaneously devoted to his partner. That internal contradiction is the necessary engine that makes the romance functional.
And crucially, makes him a safe fantasy object for the reader.
It has to be safe, at the end of the day.
That makes the stakes so much higher than the old bad boy trope.
Oh, completely different league.
I mean, the bad boy maybe just had too many tattoos and broke curfew.
Right, he rode a motorcycle.
The psychopath light is like planning world domination or running a massive organized crime syndicate, but he stops everything when she needs him to pick up a specific brand of obscure imported tea.
And that contrast is the value proposition. The traditional bad boy was often just misunderstood or rebellious, fundamentally good underneath it all.
Deep down. Yeah.
The psychopath-like hero is fundamentally dangerous. His objective morality is just absent, it's not there. But he has carved out a single space for moral allegiance, and that space is reserved entirely, 100%, for the heroine. This singular loyalty against a backdrop of universal danger becomes the ultimate symbol of commitment.
And if we look at the defining feature of this trope, it seems like obsession isn't just a side effect. It feels like it's the literal engine driving the entire story.
It is the engine.
Obsession has completely replaced traditional courtship rituals.
Absolutely. The defining feature is obsession writ large. We are far, far past dates and flowers or charming compliments.
Forget all that.
The hero is defined by a terrifyingly intense obsession. The depth of his feeling manifests not in charming little gestures, but in extreme, often illegal actions that demonstrate his willingness to transgress any boundary for her.
It's really interesting how far this trope has pushed the limits. I mean, what are some of the most shocking or extreme actions the sources indicate this hero takes? And more importantly, why do readers accept them as romantic gestures?
Well, the examples are specifically designed to illustrate absolute devotion. They have to be extreme. The sources mention actions that are, unequivocally illegal and unethical outside of this romance context.
Right.
He might actively burn down an entire building. Just gone.
To do what? Destroy evidence.
Destroy evidence. Eliminate a threat to her, or simply acting out of a kind of possessive rage, all motivated by her safety or her comfort.
Wow.
Or, maybe slightly less violently, but just as violating, he tracks her every single move with high-tech surveillance. He knows her location, her conversations, her schedule. Always.
That sounds entirely controlling. I mean, that's the definition of controlling, yet it's framed as this high-value display of commitment. How does the narrative successfully sell that level of violation as devotion?
It's all in the framing. It connects his actions directly to his competence and his fearlessness. The message is, I am so competent that I can literally bend the world to your will, and my obsession proves that nothing is more important to me than you are.
So the surveillance isn't framed as distrust?
Never. It's framed as unwavering vigilance. It's the ultimate fantasy of undivided attention and absolute unshakable security, even if that security comes wrapped in a whole bunch of felony charges.
Okay, here's where it gets really, really interesting for me. Why now? Why this particular, highly specific, and often morally indefensible trope? Why is it the #1 trend dominating our charts in 2026?
This has to be rooted in something deeper than just wanting a darker plot.
It has to be.
And this is where we connect the literary trend to the broader cultural pulse. Our sources point toward a very compelling societal explanation for this. This trend is a powerful, perhaps subconscious reaction to the pervasive friendship recession.
Right.
And just that debilitating, nagging feeling of being utterly invisible in a massive, fragmented, and digitally mediated world.
The idea that in a world of constant scrolling where our attention is the scarcest resource, we just feel starved for genuine, focused, singular attention.
Exactly. I mean, let's detail the modern experience for a second. We are constantly reachable via digital means.
Right. Constantly.
Yet we are increasingly isolated and starved for genuine connection. Our attention is fractured by notifications, demands, endless streams of data.
In this landscape, no one feels truly seen or prioritized.
Never. Attention is scattered, it's fleeting, and it's highly transactional.
So in this environment of chronic digital fragmentation and social isolation, the power fantasy offered by the psychopath-light hero becomes incredibly potent.
It's a direct antidote.
Because it reverses that fragmentation entirely.
It provides the cure. When this hero, who's capable and feared and emotionally detached from all the noise of the world, when he enters the story, the protagonist immediately becomes the absolute center of his entire universe.
He is his sole focus.
His single moral compass, the object of his intense, uncreated attention. Nothing else matters.
So the villainy is actually a double measure of value then. The more dangerous he is to others, which signifies his competence and his power, the more valuable she must be to him, which signifies her unique importance.
It's a dark but a very, very resonant equation. For a reader who might be feeling lonely or overlooked or just lost in the crowd.
Feelings that are exacerbated by our generalized modern anxiety and loneliness.
Absolutely. For that reader, this singular, undivided, terrifyingly intense attention is a profound fantasy experience. It represents an extreme, undeniable form of being seen and valued in a way that modern polite society, which, demands that people be busy, detached, and emotionally measured, it just often fails to deliver. This offers complete existential validation.
And there's a secondary element to his competence, too, isn't there? In a world that's characterized by economic instability and geopolitical chaos, the psychopath light is fundamentally effective. His ruthlessness means he succeeds.
Yes.
Does the reader also crave that stabilizing force?
Absolutely. The sources strongly suggest the heroine is often attracted not just to his devotion, but to his absolute competence. He runs the syndicate, he handles the global threat, he solves the impossible problem with ruthless efficiency.
He gets things
done.
Yeah.
His capacity for destruction is mirrored by his capacity for protection.
Yep.
So in a world where systems feel constantly fragile and unreliable, having an ultimate efficient force dedicated solely to your personal stability is a very, very appealing fantasy.
It's a profound exploration of modern insecurity, just veiled in romance.
That's the perfect way to put it.
And this inherent danger and this intense cultural resonance, it leads us directly to the debate that has set BookTok on fire globally. I mean, this is the million-dollar question. Does enjoying this kind of dark fiction automatically romanticize toxic traits, or is it merely a safe imaginative laboratory for exploring taboo desires?
This is the nexus of the entire cultural controversy, and it relies so heavily on how we define the boundary between fantasy and reality. The primary defense from the dedicated readers of this genre is what you mentioned before, the imaginative laboratory argument.
Right.
They state very robustly that fiction is a dedicated, controlled, safe space, a place where readers can explore visceral, intense, and often morally transgressive emotions.
Things like fear, submission, dominance.
Overwhelming protection, yeah, all of it. And they can do it without any requirement for real-world danger or consequence or ethical failure.
It's the thrill without the spill. You get the rush of being completely consumed by this powerful force, of pushing your boundaries in a way society forbids.
But the moment you close the book,
you're safe. Physically and morally safe.
It's the perfect analogy. The roller coaster. We deliberately seek out the feeling of falling, the sensation of danger, the heart-in-your-throat terror. But we implicitly rely on the fact that the seatbelt is real, the mechanics are sound, and the danger is strictly simulated. The imaginative laboratory allows you to safely test the limits of your emotional and relational landscape without any actual harm.
I understand the imaginative laboratory concept, but surely the genre of the reading material matters here.
How so?
Well, we don't really worry about normalizing murder when someone reads a thriller, but the conversation changes immediately when it touches on intimate, emotional relationships. Why is a moral boundary so much stricter here?
And that's the key challenge that the critics raise. The reason the boundary is stricter is because fictional violence in, say, a thriller or a horror novel, it targets an external threat. And it's generally acknowledged as an anomaly, as something bad.
Okay.
Fictional abuse, coercion, or highly controlling behavior in a romance narrative, however, targets the relational core, the very foundation of how we interact with partners. The concern is that the behavior is presented not just as happening, but as an acceptable, even attractive template for intimate connection.
And this brings us to the powerful counterargument, the one that pushes back against the assumption of a clear boundary.
Absolutely. Critics, and this includes certain behavioral psychologists, introduced the concept of subconscious normalization.
Okay.
This is the core worry. If a reader consumes prolonged, immersive content where the narrative constantly tells them that coercion is passion or that highly controlling behavior is simply devotion, they might, over time, begin to tolerate or even subconsciously gravitate toward those very behaviors in their real-world partners.
It's like a subtle erosion of boundaries. It's not an intellectual conscious belief that, stalking is okay.
No, it's much more subtle than that.
It's a subliminal softening of personal defenses that makes them slower to react to genuine red flags when they see them.
Precisely. The core danger is the subliminal impact on your internal risk assessment system, that intuitive gut feeling. Narratives that repeatedly frame behavior like tracking her location or isolating her from friends as necessary protection can fundamentally skew a person's internal red flag sensors.
Can you give us a more concrete hypothetical scenario just to illustrate this risk of normalization?
Certainly. Let's take the example of location tracking. In a dark romance novel, the hero checking his partner's phone location constantly is framed as a sign of his intense, overwhelming care.
Right, and his immediate availability should she ever be in danger.
Exactly. A reader who is repeatedly immersed in that narrative, where the reward for that boundary violation is this high-stakes, passionate romance. They might start seeing a real-life partner checking their phone location, not as an invasion of privacy or a sign of distrust,
but as a cute, intense indication of care.
purely because the fictional narrative rewarded that exact behavior. The line between protective and controlling becomes blurred in that emotional subconscious filter.
This really forces us to look at the moral coin of this debate in detail, as the sources lay it out. We have these strong counterpoints that highlight the complexity. Let's walk through the comparative arguments. I want to make sure this is crystal clear for our listener.
We should take our time here. This debate is deeply, deeply nuanced, and both sides carry some powerful weight.
Okay, so on one side, we have catharsis, the safe, necessary release of repressed or so-called shadow desires. And on the other, we have normalization, the genuine desensitization to real abuse.
The catharsis argument is essentially, I need this outlet because real life demands polite constraints.
Right. Yeah.
We all harbor transgressive dark thoughts or
Right.
transgressive power fantasies that are impossible or, unethical to enact in reality. And fiction provides a healthy, contained outlet for those feelings. It's an essential pressure release valve.
But normalization.
Normalization, however, is the long-term cumulative effect. It's not about the immediate emotional release of one book. It's about the gradual internal acceptance of destructive relationship standards as exciting or romantic over many books.
Okay, next up, we have the argument of agency versus impressionability. Pro-dark readers assert that their spaces, which are overwhelmingly women-led, should be completely free to explore any fantasy, no matter how dark, without external judgment or, paternalistic moralizing.
And this is a powerful point. It's tied directly to autonomy and feminist discourse. The argument is essentially, you police my body, you police my career, you police me everywhere else. Who are you to tell me what my state fantasy should be?
Yeah.
But the counter-concern of impressionability focuses squarely on the vulnerability of the youngest readership. We're talking Gen Alpha and younger Gen Z. Critics worry that these readers, who are still developing their foundational relationship standards and are highly susceptible to media influence, may lack the maturity, the experience, and the critical distance to distinguish fantasy power dynamics from healthy, respectful standards in reality.
Which brings us to the fundamental epistemological question. The core belief that fiction does not equal reality versus the worry of subliminal impact. Readers argue they are capable of critical separation. I know it's not real.
And that is the hardest, perhaps unanswerable, line to draw. Most adult readers can separate fictional scenarios from real-life expectations, yes, I believe that. But the power of compelling storytelling is insidious precisely because it bypasses the conscious critical mind and speaks directly to the emotional center. When a narrative consistently and emotionally frames boundary violation as devotion, it creates a deeply ingrained, almost instinctive pattern. The subliminal impact isn't about convincing your conscious mind. It's about reshaping the emotional filters we use to assess potential partners and relational risk.
Now let's zoom in on that agency argument because it really touches on a sensitive cultural nerve, often summarized as the charge of subconscious misogyny.
It's a very compelling point, and it's consistently raised by dark romance authors and readers themselves. They argue that shaming women for their choice of reading material, specifically their enjoyment of dark or taboo fantasies, often amounts to a form of subconscious misogyny.
What does that mean exactly?
It implies a fundamental distrust in women's critical intelligence. The idea that women are uniquely incapable of that critical separation and must have their moral consumption policed for the good of society and for their own safety.
It highlights a stark double standard. I think many listeners, myself included, have probably experienced that judgment.
It's very common.
We tolerate extreme violence, morally ambiguous, often despicable characters, and intense power dynamics in male-dominated genres.
Thrillers, spy novels, violent video games.
Right. And society just accepts that as harmless entertainment.
Absolutely. If a man reads a historical fiction about a brutal dictator, no one assumes he's going to become a dictator or that his preference is morally concerning.
Of course not.
But the minute a woman chooses a dark romantic fantasy, suddenly society becomes the moral police, questioning the health of her preferences, the integrity of her moral compass.
It's infantilizing.
It is. This policing is fundamentally gendered. It's effectively attempting to shame women back into only reading appropriate or sweet fantasies.
Yeah.
It's a way of saying, you are too impressionable to handle these complex themes.
However, we transition now from the philosophical debate over fantasy and freedom to the tangible, undeniable issue of harm. And this is where the conversation shifts immediately to the mandatory inclusion of trigger warnings, or TWs.
And this moves the goalposts entirely.
Yeah.
The argument ceases to be about whether a trope is inherently good or bad, or whether a reader should enjoy it. It becomes one of consumer safety and absolute transparency.
Right.
In 2026, the sources show us that books are being heavily censored and shunned, what the community calls cancellation. Not necessarily because of the dark content itself, but specifically because they lacked adequate, clear trigger warnings.
So if a book contains, say, non-consensual acts, graphic violence, or depictions of severe trauma, but it is misleadingly marketed as a sweet romance or just a spicy read,
With no warning.
with no warnings, that is deemed completely unacceptable.
Exactly. The harm is in the deception, not the trope itself. If a reader goes into a book expecting a gentle, slow burn and they encounter graphic depictions of assault, that is a violation of their personal safe space. It can be genuinely re-traumatizing.
So it shifts the whole discussion from moral judgment to ethical marketing.
Precisely. The community insists that if you are going to explore the darkest corners of human relationships, you must be transparent, specific, and detailed. You have to give the reader full agency to opt in or out based on their own emotional thresholds and past experiences.
And this tension between the right to explore any fantasy and the responsibility to protect readers from accidental traumatizing exposure, that is the very foundation for this new era of reader accountability. Which leads us perfectly into our final section. The immense power and really the policing capability of BookTok. This community has evolved so rapidly. It went from a simple recommendation engine to an active, organized body focused on vetting offers.
It's no longer just about generating hype.
No, it's about demanding ethical accountability.
It has been a seismic shift in market influence.
Yeah.
I mean, to understand the accountability, you first have to understand the power. BookTok, based on these short-form video recommendations, is a force that can turn a debut, self-published author into a global bestseller literally overnight.
It's an incredible sales driver.
It's an organic, massive sales driver. And initially, yes, it was pure enthusiasm. Read this book. Now, the community is highly sophisticated and structured. And the focus is intensely on vetting the moral integrity of the content.
And the mechanism for this vetting is the rise of these organized accountability squads. This isn't just one person leaving a critical review anymore. This is a coordinated, critical community response that operates with incredible speed and efficiency.
Absolutely. The process is instant and it's highly visible. When a popular BookTok creator posts a video praising a new story, especially one involving a taboo trope like the psychopath light, the comment section is immediately filled not just with praise, but with systematic checks. These accountability squads are active users who specialize in checking for consistency, ethical boundaries, content warnings, and the responsible handling of sensitive themes.
So what are the specific mechanics of a call-out or a check? What are they looking for beyond just the presence of a trigger warning?
They're checking the execution of the themes. For example, if a book involves a character dealing with intense trauma, the squads verify whether that trauma is handled realistically.
What does that mean, realistically?
Well, is the protagonist allowed to struggle? Or is the trauma instantly fixed by the hero's love?
I see.
If the book fails to show the cost or the real consequence of the trauma, if it's just used as a convenient plot device to make her vulnerable, That's a serious red flag.
And what happens when they find a discrepancy or a failure to handle a sensitive theme responsibly?
The response is swift community rejection. It often leads to a cancellation, which means the book is shunned, its reviews are bombed on all platforms, and the author's other works are scrutinized with a fine-tooth comb. This rapid collective action has fundamentally altered the relationship between author and reader. It's imposed a strict new social contract for creators.
Let's define this new contract because it moves way beyond standard literary criticism. This is entering the realm of ethical publishing standards, really.
It absolutely does. Yeah. In the early days of self-publishing, that whole hustle culture of rapid output.
Right, publish a book a month.
Exactly. Authors often prioritize shocking tropes, extreme violence, and quick clicks to maximize sales, sometimes without sufficient regard for the narrative integrity or the emotional impact. This new contract demands integrity and responsibility, and the most common rejection criteria now is the distinction between handling a sensitive topic by glorifying it versus exploring it.
Okay, what is the tangible difference between glorifying and exploring a sensitive theme like trauma or coercion in a narrative?
Glorification means using the sensitive topic lightly, sensationally, or without any understanding of its real-world weight. It's often integrated seamlessly into the romance as a desirable trait.
For example?
For example, glorification would be a book where the trauma is instantly overcome by a single passionate encounter, or where the hero's coercion is constantly framed as the single sexiest element of the story with zero negative narrative consequence for the heroine. The community rejects that instantly.
And exploration.
Exploration, however, is the new expectation. This means the narrative has to show the cost, the consequences, the emotional complexity, and crucially, the protagonist's journey through it. The trauma isn't the plot device, the recovery, or the attempt at finding stability despite the circumstances. That's the story. Responsible exploration, supported by adequate, precise warnings, is now the price of admission to the community.
So if we look at the results of this fierce accountability, is this cancellation culture ultimately helping or hurting the dark romance genre? Because it seems like an exceptionally powerful double-edged sword.
It is unequivocally doing both, which makes it one of the most dynamic areas of study in contemporary publishing right now.
Let's start with how it's helping. What positive changes has this intense policing forced upon the market?
Well, it's helping by imposing crucial standards of responsibility and consumer protection. First and foremost, it forces authors to be far more rigorous with their content warnings and their marketing language.
Right.
The community's policing ensures that the market description accurately reflects the darkness that's inside the book. The goal is to make sure no reader accidentally stumbles into a psychopath-light narrative when they're genuinely searching for a slow-burn Hallmark story.
So that element of consumer transparency and reader safety is invaluable.
It's ethical marketing, enforced by the readership itself. It's incredible.
It brings a real integrity to the marketing of dark content by forcing honesty. But what about the damage? How is this movement hurting the genre?
The damage comes from the significant chilling effect it has on creative risk-taking. It creates what many authors perceive as a moral police atmosphere, an ever-present fear of misinterpretation. And this pressure can actively scare talented writers away from developing truly gray and morally complex characters.
The kind of characters who actually reflect real-world moral compromises and ambiguities.
Exactly. So, if the character's actions defy easy moral classification, or if their narrative arc is too ambiguous, the author risks being instantly labeled problematic and losing their income source entirely.
Which would be devastating.
It's a huge risk.
Yeah.
And this often pushes the genre towards simplified extremes, either perfectly moral heroes or cartoonishly evil villains. Complexity is often the first casualty of intense moral policing, because nuance requires the author to take risks that the accountability squads might not tolerate if they're executed imperfectly.
So we risk losing the most interesting stories.
The ones that truly push ethical boundaries and force the reader to deeply contemplate the difference between right and wrong.
There's one final fascinating layer here that connects back to the core power fantasy, and that's the demand for feminist agency. Even in the darkest fiction, the reader wants to feel empowered.
This is the critical filter. This determines if a dark book is accepted or rejected by the current community. The 2026 reader demands dark fantasy with feminist agency. They are not looking for passive victims to be rescued by a monster or for trauma to simply happen to the protagonist without any response.
They want to be the center of the universe, but they also demand strategic influence over that monster.
That's it. They want to be the reason the monster exists. But they also need to be the person holding the leash and setting the terms.
That's the perfect summary for the required delicate balance.
The reader demands that the monster must bow to them, not break them. The protagonist has to maintain emotional or intellectual or strategic power over the intensely devoted psychopathic hero.
And if the author loses this balance,
If the protagonist feels too overwhelmed, too powerless, or too much like a passive victim with no influence over their own fate, the community often rejects the book.
and not just as dark.
No, not merely as dark, but specifically as harmful.
So the ultimate rejection isn't even over the level of darkness, but over the perceived lack of agency for the main female character within that darkness.
Yes.
If the author fails to provide that sense of control or influence in the face of all that obsession, they lose the community's trust and advocacy entirely.
And that transforms the narrative.
Yeah.
It goes from an empowering exploration of a dark dynamic into a simple depiction of abuse, which is precisely what the community seeks to avoid and police against. It brings the whole conversation full circle, right back to the dangers of normalization.
Wow. What an intense deep dive. We've covered everything from the clinical selective definition of the psychopath light to the sophisticated global ethical landscape of these digital reading communities.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. And what this all means, I think, is that we are collectively, as a culture, in the process of figuring out exactly where the event horizon of fiction lies. You know, how far into the dark can we go, imaginatively, before we lose sight of the values and the boundaries we need to uphold in the real world?
That metaphor of the event horizon is extremely apt. The central conclusion, informed by this era of extreme accountability, is absolutely transparency.
It has to be.
It is the non-negotiable requirement for creators. Authors must be brutally honest and incredibly precise about what is inside their books. And readers, in turn, have to be honest with themselves about why they are seeking out these transgressive narratives. What deeply seated social need is being fulfilled in that imaginative laboratory?
The goal, then, is to maintain that crucial separation, to make sure that while we explore the intense, transgressive, and dangerous dynamic on the page, we successfully manage to keep the monsters on the page.
And the harmony, or at least the respect and agency in real life.
Exactly.
And this entire conversation, whether a reader prefers the terrifying devotion of the psychopath-like hero or insists only on green flags, that debate is the very mechanism that keeps the community healthy and dynamic.
It forces constant reevaluation.
Of personal boundaries and societal norms, which is valuable intellectual exercise for everyone.
And crucially, as we wrap up, I think we need to stress the importance of keeping shame out of the library.
Yes.
Whether your chosen fantasy is sweet, morally gray, or profoundly dark, as long as you are reading responsibly, respecting warnings, and supporting authors who are transparent, you are participating in a valuable cultural conversation. The freedom to explore fantasy without judgment is paramount.
Absolutely. The act of reading is one of personal discovery and exploration. We should be encouraging that exploration, not policing it based on some external moral panic.
Building on this idea of transparency and the new social contract, I want to leave you, the learner, with a final provocative thought to consider long after we sign off. We established that the rise of the psychopath-light hero is driven by a craving for singular, undivided, and sometimes dangerous obsession, acting as an antidote to invisibility. If modern fiction increasingly reflects this desperate cultural craving, what critical hidden social need, what feeling of being seen and valued is our modern, fragmented, digitally saturated society failing to fulfill for its members? Is the psychopath-light hero simply the most effective symptom of a mass cultural loneliness?
A truly fascinating question for personal reflection. The literature always holds a mirror up to society's unfulfilled desires.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this intense deep dive into the darkest, most compelling corners of modern romance. We know that navigating this new world of tropes and warnings can be complex, so we've put a detailed trigger warning guide for 2026 readers in the show notes to help you navigate your next dark read safely and with full agency.
Happy reading, everyone.
And stay curious. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.